Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share Wendigo and cryptids encounter stories. First story, Georgia Wendigo encounter. Growing up in the mountains of North Georgia, camping and hiking were things me and my brother did so often it was second nature. So anytime Ryan and I had a break from school, we would head straight for the woods. We packed our gear, let our parents know where we were going, and that was that. No questions asked. We decided to camp about midways through Jack's River Trail in the Cohutta Wilderness, and it's a trail we knew fairly well as we had used to a few times before to practice long hikes. We arrived at the trailhead around lunchtime, parked the car, got our gear out, and headed into the woods. We passed a few hikers as moved along and asked them how the trail looked, and the answer was always the same: wet. Jack's River Trail probably crossed the river 50 times as it went along its 17-mile-plus journey, and with the colder temperatures of late fall settling in, it was harder for the trail to stay dry. We moved deeper into the trail and started to look for a place to make camp. This is where Ryan and I made our first mistake. You see, Ryan and I have this rule. We don't camp near people if at all possible. Call us paranoid, but the last thing we want is for someone to drag us out of our tents and into the woods, never to be seen again. So we always camped a pretty decent ways off of the trail and in the area that wasn't popular with overnight camping. Roughly 2.5 hours or so, we found what we thought was the perfect place to set up for the 2 nights that we would be out. We came up to Horseshoe Bend and ventured about half a mile off the trail into a clearing and set up. We built a teepee fire lay for that night and pitched our tents on either side. After setting up and unloading, we decided to walk back to the trail and go exploring around some of many swimming holes Jack's River had to offer. This was during Thanksgiving break, and I remember being surprised at how few people were on the trail. Maybe it was the weather or the fact that this was early in the week, but there didn't seem to be anyone hiking, much less staying the night. Around 5 o'clock, Ryan and I headed back to camp to start our fire, make dinner, and settle in for the night. As soon as the sun began to set, the cold rushed in. We added more wood to the fire, sat close, and just enjoyed conversation. Ryan was 2 years behind me in school. I was a senior, and he was a sophomore, but growing up we had always been close. We always hung out in the same groups, played the same sports, had the same hobbies, etc. Around 9, we were settled comfortably around the fire. I had just texted our mom to let her know we were safe and getting ready for bed, and I remember we were talking about dreading going to our grandparents' house for Thanksgiving and having the same awkward conversations we had each year with family we only saw on holidays when things started to get strange. We were no stranger to sounds in the woods, and these woods were full of animals, from deer to black bears and even the random wild boar. If you were in the woods enough, you learned to distinguish certain sounds, and what we were hearing I can only chalk up to as odd. What Ryan and I heard was what sounded like someone sneaking around slowly just out of eyesight. With an animal walking on 4 legs, you hear a tighter group of steps, but what we were hearing sound very distinct to what a human sounds like when walking slowly or trying to move without making much sound. I remember we both pulled out our flashlights and shone it in the direction we felt the sounds were coming from, but that is what was so weird. Whenever we would fix our lights on a spot, we thought the sound were coming from the location of the sound would suddenly change. It was as if there were multiple people walking around us. That's when the whistling started. At first I thought it was the wind, and I remember thinking maybe the wind is just throwing leaves around, and what we are hearing is nothing but the wilderness around us. Ryan looked at me and asked if I was hearing that. I didn't answer and was trying to focus hard on each individual sound. 2 consecutive notes with roughly a 3 to 4 second gap, and then 2 more consecutive notes. Over and over again. Ryan kept asking if I heard that, and I put my finger to my lips, trying to keep him from talking. The fear I felt was incredible. My jaw was tight, my fist clenched, knowing I wasn't ready for whatever was out there if it was anything at all. The whistling continued for what felt like forever, but thinking it through was maybe 5 minutes when Ryan finally yelled out into the darkness, "Hey, quiet." The whistling stopped. The crunching of the wood stopped. Nothing. I was pissed. I looked at Ryan with a, "What the hell?" look, and he shrugged his shoulders. "I had to do something," he said. I just shook my head. We sat there in silence for a few minutes when the woods erupted with noise. Something or someone was running in a circle around our campsite. The whistling came back. 2 consecutive notes with the same 3 to 4 second gap, and then 2 more consecutive notes. How could someone whistle this loudly without cracking while also running? I was done. I stood up, shining my flashlight in all directions, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was screwing with us. Nothing. It felt close enough to touch, but we never saw a thing. That's when the movement stopped, but the whistling was still constant. It was so loud. Inhumanly loud. I looked at Ryan and told him to call the police. Now this is the part one will never forget. The part one never liked to talk about. While Ryan was on the phone with the dispatcher and telling them our location and what was going on, I stepped around the fire towards my tent. Inside my bag I had a 6-inch fixed blade that I always carried and thought I would feel a bit more comfortable with it in my hand more than just my flashlight. Yes, I went to unzip my tent. Trying to keep my eyes toward the woods, I heard some movement directly in front of me. I swept my light up in front of me, and for maybe 2 seconds I saw it. Whatever this person or thing was, it was about 5 feet up in a tree. Everything about it was long. Its arms, legs, neck, fingers, everything. And it was fast. As soon as the light hit it, launched backwards off of the tree. I heard it land, but it either jumped an impossible distance or landed in a thicket, because I heard it but never saw. I don't think I have ever yelled so loud. I ran back to where Ryan was and sat down. He kept asking me what I saw, but I couldn't answer. I just kept thinking about what I saw. Maybe 10 minutes later, we saw a couple of flashlight beams coming through the woods, and about 3 guys came into view, asking if everything was okay. I settled a bit and started asking them if they had seen or heard anything. All they said was they heard a lot of movement and then heard my scream, and that's when they headed in our direction. I tried to explain what had happened without sounding crazy, but it didn't seem to work. One of the guys walked around a bit and came back and said he didn't see anything. Ryan told them that we called the police, and roughly 30 minutes later, a park ranger showed up. Ryan and I tried explaining everything to him, but he just chalked it up to either a curious animal or some campers trying to mess with us. Either way, Ryan and I decided we weren't staying the night. We packed our stuff up and walked out of the woods with the ranger. He took our statement and we got in our car and drove home. Ryan and I don't talk about what happened that night, but neither of us have been back to Jack's River Trail and will probably never go back. Second story. How I survived and killed out a Wendigo. My family was shocked when we heard our Uncle Benjamin was found dead in the woods surrounding his vacation home. I didn't know him very well, as he lived far away from most of the family. So, I only saw him at family meetings. His funeral wasn't a big event. There were my 2 aunts, Lucy and Laura, my other uncle Stephen, and my little nephew, Mikey. In Ben's will was written that I got his vacation home. I figured that it was nice to spend some time in a place where there was no distraction, as I had to study for my exams. Also, if I would rent a small apartment, I would probably have to live off instant noodles and water for a few months. The day after the funeral, I packed up my things so that I could move to my new home. The drive itself was uneventful, though I did underestimate the length of the drive. When I was driving through the woods, I thought that I saw a face or two amongst the trees, but I just blamed it on my mind for being a bit sleepy, as it was around 11 p.m. when I arrived. Once I was there, I put all the food I had in the fridge and made my bed so I could sleep. When I woke up the next day, I showered, made some breakfast, and hopped in front of the TV to watch a show on Netflix. Halfway through my show, I thought I heard barking coming from the woods, but didn't think anything of it as I thought it was coming from my show. However, the barking did not stop, so I decided to check it out. I walked a bit in the direction I thought it was coming from, but I couldn't find anything. So, I shrugged and walked back. The rest of the day was uneventful. I did, however, sort out a few moving boxes. As it was getting kind of late, I decided to watch one more episode of my show and head to bed afterwards. The next day started off normal. I showered, ate breakfast, and started to unpack a few boxes. However, around 10 a.m. I heard it again. Barking? This time I knew it wasn't just my mind playing tricks on me, as I heard it loud and clear. I directly stopped unpacking and went to investigate the noise. When I went into the woods to check out the sound, I found a tiny Labrador pup. It was covered in mud and scratches. I knew I couldn't just leave him there, so I took him home. I gave him a bath to get all the mud and filth off him, and then I took him to the closest vet, which was about 5 miles away. Once we arrived, I took a seat in the waiting room. I couldn't help but notice that the other people in the room had a small look of judgment towards me. I totally understood why, as the pup looked like he had been attacked. When it was our turn, I heard a soft whimper coming from the pup, but he did decide to walk with me to the room. After a few checkups, the vet asked me if I owned the pup. I said no, and that I found him in the woods. The vet went quiet for a second and asked me if I wanted him to check for a chip. I said yes, and the vet checked, but found no chip. So, I suggested that if he didn't belong to anyone, I could take care of him. The vet sighed and went to get the papers for me to fill in, so I could take the pup home. On the way home, I went to the local pet store to buy some toys, food, and a food and water bowl. After buying all the stuff I would need to take care of him, I thought of a name for him. After about 5 minutes of thinking, I came up with the perfect name. Winston. I called out. Winston directly jumped up from his seat and started barking and wagging his tail. When we got home, I directly put everything in place. I put his dog bed next to the couch with some toys, and his food and water bowl in front of the TV. After that long day, I was very tired, so I decided to watch a few episodes of my show. When I sat down, Winston started whining whilst wagging his tail. I asked, "Do you want to sit next to me?" He answered the question with a happy growl and jumped on the couch beside me. I watched TV until it was around 10 p.m. and decided to go to bed. I decided to put Winston's bed in the bedroom next to me for the first night so that he could get used to the house. When I woke up the next morning, I noticed that Winston's bed was empty and that the bedroom door was open. I thought that he had walked through the door to watch the birds through the giant window in the living room. However, when I went to check, I didn't see him. But then I noticed that the front door was wide open, even though I knew I locked it the previous night. My heart dropped. I panicked and ran out of the door to find him. After about 20 minutes of searching, I finally found him with a leaf he found in his mouth. I picked him up and carried him inside. It was near lunchtime, so I decided to put a frozen pizza in the microwave. I was very hungry as I hadn't eaten anything for breakfast. After eating, I took Winston for a walk, but he kept on looking into the tree line, as if something were there. Each time I thought he saw something, I looked, but couldn't see anything. After about 10 minutes of walking, I decided to head back to the house. I am glad I made that decision, because right after I closed the door behind us, it started storming. The sky became a brown/yellow color, and I could see the clouds rolling over. I'd seen this weather only once before. I was visiting a friend that moved to the Netherlands. Then I first saw this type of weather. I decided to make some hot chocolate for myself and sat down on the couch to binge watch my show for a while. Winston was sleeping right next to me. After a while, I fell asleep too, but I was awakened by Winston. whining by the front door. I decided to check up on him and noticed that he was shivering from fear. I looked through the window of the front door and saw nothing. I figured it was some deer walking by that had spooked the little pup. I picked Winston up and carried him to the couch so that could cuddle him to ease his nerves. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to do an early morning walk with Winston. After walking a bit, I saw a pack of deer just roaming around in an open area in the forest. This only reinforced my thought of Winston being scared from some deer just roaming around on our property. However, when we came back from our walk, I noticed something different about the front door. Scratch marks. Upon closer inspection, I saw that the scratches were massive. They were all about 10 inches long and 1 inch deep. Now, I'm no expert in forest animals, but I dang well knew that those didn't belong to a deer. I decided to call a door repairman to fix it. They arrived about 30 minutes. "Those are some massive marks on your door, Bud," one of the men said. "Yeah, I would get something for protection if I were you," the other one said. I followed his advice and later bought a small pistol to protect myself and Winston. After I got back from the gun store, the men were already done with the door. I gave them a thank you, and they left. The following day started as normal. I woke up, had an early shower, and decided to do another early walk with Winston. I saw 2 squirrels fighting over some pine cones, a flock of birds flying in the opposite direction of my house, and I think I spotted a small mouse running through the freshly fallen leaves. However, Winston was shivering against my leg, whining. I asked what was wrong, and he basically jumped. I decided then and there to head back. I heard something growl in the distance, and another flock of birds flew in the opposite direction of the sound. When I was back on my property, I noticed something weird. My front door was ripped from its hinges and was lying about 3 meters to the left. I directly pulled my pistol out of my pocket because I didn't know if who or whatever had left yet. When I walked into the house, I froze. There were scratches everywhere. Whatever had done this had enormous claws. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that the claw marks were the exact same as the ones on the door from yesterday. I also noticed that my fridge door was hanging from its hinges. When I looked in the fridge, I saw that it was a mess. All the meat was gone, and all the drawers were ripped out of the fridge. I put the front door back in its place using the tools I had recently unpacked and fixed up the fridge. After I was done, I decided to take a little break, so I sat on the couch with my drink. After a while, I moved my arm only to touch something wet and squishy. I jumped and looked at what I had touched. It was the body of a squirrel. Well, at least what was left of it. The squirrel was mangled in gruesome ways. A part of its skull was missing. Its intestines were hanging out of its stomach and its hind legs were broken. However, it didn't bleed anymore. I guess all the blood was soaked into the couch. I cleaned up the blood and buried the squirrel. I put a small stick on the grave as a sign of respect. After that, I decided it was time to pack my things. When I was about halfway done with putting everything in boxes, it was already late in the evening. I figured it wouldn't hurt to stay here one more night, but I was very wrong about that. I was woken up by Winston. He had jumped on the bed to hide with me. He was shivering and whining because he sensed that something was wrong. I stood up. Winston let out a bark to warn me. God, I should have listened. I went to the front door as Winston was looking right at it. I looked through the window and saw something big. It looked like a deer, but I knew it wasn't one. It had massive antlers and a skull-like face, and the smell. Oh God, the smell. It smelled like a corpse that had been rotting out in the sun for days. When I heard another bark coming from Winston, the thing looked up and tried to smash the door with its head. I directly pulled out my pistol and fired 2 shots. The thing howled in pain and ran away. After that thing ran away, I began to grab my stuff. I grabbed the most important things that I would need, picked up Winston, and ran to my car. When I opened the car door, I heard the thing let out a cry behind me. I didn't look back. I hopped in my car and drove off. I'm glad that there wasn't much traffic on the road, as I was going about 90 miles an hour. I mean, can you really blame me for it? I wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. While driving to get out of the woods, I saw the trees flash by. It reminded me of the first night I got here. However, it looked much different in the daytime. It also reminded me of the face I had seen amongst the trees. I now know it wasn't my mind playing tricks on me that night, as the face I had seen looked exactly like the face of that thing. Lost in thought, I wasn't paying much attention on the road. However, I was directly awakened by the sudden movement in the trees. When I looked towards the movement, I jumped in my seat. That thing suddenly jumped in front of my car. I screamed. The creature looked at me and lunged towards me. I slammed the gas pedal and drove around the creature. It stared right at me with its hollow eyes as I drove past. For hours later, I was back in my hometown. I figured I would go to my aunt and Uncle Lucy and Stephen, but then I remembered that Mikey was allergic to dogs. So, I went to my other Aunt Laura. I figured that she would like the company of me and Winston because of the sudden passing of her brother. I texted her. I was coming over and that I was taking my new friend with me. She told me that it was nice for me to come over, but then she asked me why I would drive all that way just to see her. I told her that I would explain when I got there. After about 20 minutes of driving, I arrived at her place. She opened the door and looked at my face. "What's wrong, sweetie?" she asked me. I guess I was still looking a bit frightened after today's events. I asked if we could go inside. She agreed and we sat on the couch. "Is that your new friend?" she asked, looking at Winston. I told her yes and that his name was Winston. "That's a cute name," she said. Then she asked why I was here and why I looked so pale. I told her everything. I told her about Winston, about that monster, and about all the weird stuff that happened. She went silent for a bit. Then she asked me if I could describe the appearance of the thing. I told her about the antlers, the skull-like face, and the smell. After I told her about it, she looked terrified. She told me that my uncle called her multiple times about a giant creature roaming around on his property, and the next day he was found dead near his vacation home. She then told me that there were massive claw marks on his corpse and that he was hanging from his intestines, which were pulled out of his stomach. I was shocked. I asked if she had a laptop or computer I could use. She said yes and that she would go and get it for me. She came back with her old laptop and gave it to me. I opened Google and searched for the creature. After about 10 minutes of searching, I found out what kind of creature it was. It was called a Wendigo. After reading some bit, I knew that the creature that had attacked me was a Wendigo. I told Laura, and she was as pale as a ghost. We talked some more about all the events of the past week, but after about 20 minutes, Winston started whining. My aunt just chalked it up to Winston still being young, but I knew that wasn't the case. I told Laura that we needed to go, and she asked why. I told her that there was no time, but she insisted that she was going to stay. Then she looked at the window. Looking back through the kitchen window was the Wendigo. She screamed. I tried to run after her, but she was too fast. She ran out of the front door, only to face the Wendigo. What happened next will haunt me for the rest of my life. The Wendigo opened its mouth and roared. Then it unhinged its jaw and bit her head clean off. Winston almost ran out of the door, but I picked him up just in time. The creature looked at me and grinned. I could still see pieces of my aunt on its teeth. I ran for the back door and out on the street. I didn't stop running until I could taste blood in my mouth. After checking if everything was safe, I collapsed underneath an oak tree. I was woken up in the morning by Winston. After remembering what had happened the previous day, I started crying. Winston curled up beside me to ease my nerves. "I'm glad you're here with me, buddy," I said. After fully waking up, I figured that the best thing to do was to go back to my car and drive far away from here. However, when I was back at Aunt Lara's house, I saw that my car was turned into a wreck. The windows were smashed, the metal had been turned into shreds, and one of my car doors was hanging loose. I checked the back seat and saw that my bag was intact. I had left all my money in the bag, so it was nice that I still had it with me. After grabbing my bag, I headed towards the shopping mall to buy some food, as I had left all my food in the vacation house. While walking, I realized that the Wendigo had most likely followed me. I decided to head to the library to learn more about the beast, mostly on how to get rid of it. When I entered, the nice librarian greeted me. I asked if there were any books about the Wendigo. She told me that she would check, and I gave her a thank you. After a while, she told me that there were 2 books in the horror section and 1 in the mythology section. I thanked her and headed to the horror section to find them. After searching for about 8 minutes, I found them. Once I was done, I headed to the mythology section to find the last book. Then I headed to the exit. The librarian asked me if I had a pass, and I told her no, but that I had money. She scanned the books and I left. I decided to head to the grocery store afterwards, as I noticed it was lunchtime already. I bought a sandwich for myself and some treats for Winston. After eating, I decided to head to the local park to walk Winston. I walked about 10 minutes until I found a bench and decided to sit down and read the books I bought. When I opened the first book, I directly looked up on how I could kill the beast. When I couldn't find anything, I opened the second book. After looking, I didn't find anything either. I opened the last book that I had gotten from the mythology section. When I searched, I found information on how to kill the Wendigo. I directly went to the page and read that I needed silver bullets or a silver weapon. I remembered that there was a gun store about 1 mile away, so I decided to pack my things and head in that direction. When I entered the store, I asked if they had silver bullets. They told me they had and that they would go and look for me. Sometime later, they came back and put a small box on the counter in front of me. I knew that it was going to be pricey, but I had enough money to buy 10 bullets. I also bought a new gun, as I figured that my pistol was too small to even fit the bullets. After I made my purchase, I walked out of the door and was greeted by Winston, who was wagging his tail happily. I told him that we were finally safe and that I was going to protect him no matter the cost. He let out a bark of joy and we walked off. After my little trip to the gun store, it was almost evening. I knew I had enough time to get ready for the fight with the Wendigo. I put 3 of my bullets in the gun and waited. After about 6 minutes of waiting, Winston started whining. I knew then and there that the beast was close. I stood up and turned off the safety of my gun. I heard the thing roar in the distance. I looked in the direction of the sound, and there it was, the Wendigo. I immediately fired 2 shots and the beast howled out in pain, and it started charging towards me. I fired another shot, which gave me enough time to reload. I put another 3 bullets in the gun and fired all of them a second later. One of the bullets had hit its leg and another its eye. It collapsed and it cried out in pain. Winston started throwing a barking fit, which agitated the beast more, but it couldn't do anything as one of its legs was broken. I loaded another 3 bullets in the gun and fired the final 3 shots right into its heart. It fell unconscious, but I knew it wasn't dead as I had read that I needed to cut the heart out. I grabbed my survival knife and walked towards the hell spawn. I stabbed the rest of its legs and slit its throat. Then I began carving in its chest to get to the heart. After about 20 minutes of cutting, I had finally cut out the heart. I put the heart in my bag and headed back to Winston. Winston was hiding on the other side of the rock, where I had waited for the beast. Once he heard my voice call out, he started sprinting towards me. I kneeled, and he started giving me kisses. I cleaned my hands in the nearby lake, and we headed towards the nearest motel to sleep. When I woke up the next day, I showered, had breakfast, and headed to the nearest church so I could bury the heart. When I showed it to the nuns there, they escorted me to a burial place. I grabbed a shovel and started digging. After about 5 minutes of digging, I had created a big enough hole to bury the heart in. I put the heart in the hole and closed it. Then I went to the nearby field to pick 2 flowers, an ox-eye daisy for my uncle and a buttercup for my aunt, as it was her favorite flower. I walked back to the grave and placed down the flowers. I then went to my Aunt Lucy and my Uncle Stephen. I told them about everything. When I was done talking, they were speechless. I couldn't blame them, as I knew that the story would shock them. After they processed the story, they asked me if I was okay. I told them that I was still a bit shocked from everything that has happened. After we were done talking, they showed me the room I could stay in and then asked me if I could keep Winston away from Mikey, as he was allergic. I told them that it would be no problem as Winston was very well behaved. After we had lunch together, I asked if they had a laptop I could use. Uncle Stephen went to get it for me, as me and my aunt chatted for a bit. A minute later, Stephen came back with a laptop and handed it over to me. I then excused myself from the table and went to my room, where I began typing this story to get this message out to everyone. All I have to say is this: listen to your instincts. It saved my life, and I believe it could also save many others as well. If you notice some strange things in the woods, get out of there as quick as you can. It's hunting you. Third story. Please make sure your child behave in public. Studying abroad alone could be tough. Even without considering the difficulty of the course itself, my study in the U.S. has been quite challenging, especially in the financial aspect. Everything here was so expensive compared to back home. I felt upset every time I did my monthly budgeting. Housing, food, tuition, and transportation, they all added up to a frightening amount. So, I started taking a part-time job. It was a medium-sized Thai restaurant, just about 15 minutes from my dormitory. All the employees there were all Thai, and they immediately hired me as a waitress for a simple reason: being able to speak both Thai and English decently. Although I was the youngest there, I fit in easily, and everyone welcomed me as the little sister of the team. It was one of those rare occurrences where when the management claimed that they worked together like a family, they really meant it. The loneliness of being in a vastly different cultural environment bonded us, and we always looked out for one another. Overall, it was a really good workplace. The pay was not bad, and I also got paid extra with some free Thai meal every shift. The food was far from authentic. My mom would faint if she saw the chef put broccolis and carrots into green curry, but the part where we crowded into the kitchen and chit-chat over a hot meal together before the shift started was what I looked forward to the most each day. It was a little wholesome moment that reminded me of my family back home. There was one extra task that I needed to do each day before the meal, though. On the far corner of the restaurant was an old wooden shelf holding a small doll of a boy wearing a traditional Thai costume. This deity was called Kumanthong. The word Kumanthong meant a golden boy. The practice of adopting Kumanthong was a very old belief dating back hundreds of years, and somehow it still survived until today. Ask any Thai person you know about this, and you might hear an interesting anecdote. Kumanthong's origin was quite morbid, as expected. In the past, dead fetuses of children who died while still in their mother's womb were roasted and dried by a practitioner of black magic to create a Kumanthong. Through a specific ritual, the spirit of the stillborn babies would be invoked to possess these dried corpses. The owner could then adopt them and worship them, feeding them food like a real child. Obviously, you couldn't use stillborns to create Kumanthong now, so people opted to use dolls instead. Still creepy, but it definitely resulted in less grave robbing if I had to guess. People believe that the Kumanthong would bring luck and prosperity to any household that took good care of it. My grandmother also adopted one at her home in Bangkok. She had always had it ever since she moved there 60 years ago. One of the stories she would tell me all the time when I was young was about the one time she forgot to turn off the stove before going to bed. She told me that she had a bizarre dream that night where she saw a small child dressed in traditional Thai outfit running in her house, giggling like he was trying to show her something. She felt like someone was pulling her leg, then woke up to the smell of a burning kitchen. Luckily, she was able to put out the fire very quickly, and until today, she still believed that the Kumanthong came to warn her about the fire in her dream. Noi, the owner of the restaurant, must have held the same strong belief as my grandmother. I had never met her, but our manager told us that she was quite superstitious. Apparently, she came to the U.S. with almost nothing, but somehow managed to buy the restaurant at a very favorable price. Not only that, a famous food blogger came in a few years ago and left a good review, resulting in the business picking up very quickly. Noi credited all these lucky events to the power of the Kumanthong. Therefore, it was crucial for her that we treated the Kumanthong with utmost respect. We had to treat it like a real child. I was never the person who would believe in these supernatural deities. But in Thai, we had a phrase saying if you don't believe in it, don't disrespect it. That phrase was something I lived by all my life. So when the manager asked me to take a small plate of food to the Kumanthong, I complied. Kumanthong, the dinner is ready. Please enjoy. I murmured to the doll as I placed the tray of food and a glass of red Fanta on the shrine. Yes, red Fanta. As absurd as it may sound, Kumanthong's choice of drink was apparently strawberry soda. People used to offer the Kumanthong blood in the past, but not anymore. It was a common agreement that since the red Fanta and blood were both red, they should be an acceptable substitute. It was just a normal day for me. I completed my daily ritual of offering food to the Kumanthong and went about my day, getting ready for the restaurant to open at 6. It had been raining all afternoon without a sign of stopping, so I expected it to be one of those slower days. Around 15 minutes to 6, the first customer showed up. They were a family of 3 consisting of a father in his late 30s, a tired-looking mother, and a young son dangling in her arms. The child was about 3 or 4, which was the worst age to be out in a public place. Most of the time, they were not old enough to learn to behave properly in public, but they were not young enough to be confined to the child seat for the entirety of the meal either. I glanced at my manager, Nam Wan, who returned me a look that said, "Go deal with them, please." "Good evening, sir. I'm afraid we won't be opening until 6. I said politely. "We understand, but can we just wait here? I have a reservation at 6 under Jim. We plan to go to the park before coming here, but you know," the father gestured to the pouring rain outside, "so we are a little early." Of course. I led him and his family to the reserved table, right under the Kumanthong's shrine. "We'll let you know when we're ready to take your order. Would you like some drinks meanwhile?" "Yes, just water," the father said. "Daddy, can I have a Coke?" the boy asked as his mother placed him on a chair.
Fine.
"Water and a can of Coke then." The father gave in. The kitchen was already busy even though no order had come in yet. The chef was thawing the meat and cutting vegetables, while the kitchen hands were busy preparing spring rolls fillings. I squeezed past them to the fridge where we kept all soft drinks. There were some iced tea and lemonade soda, but no Coke. "Are we out of Coke, Namwan?" I asked the restaurant's manager, who was wrapping spring rolls nearby. "I told you to refill it last night, didn't I, Lek?" Namwan shouted at one of the kitchen hands. "Sis, I'm so sorry, but I forgot," he shouted back. This guy. Namwan sighed deeply and then turned to me. Fa, can you please go buy some from the grocery store near the bus stop? Just take the money from the cash register. I didn't want to go outside in this weather, but someone had to do it, and it was better if I did it before more customers arrived. Since everyone else was busy, I decided to take one for the team. I grabbed the umbrella and started walking. The store was just 2 blocks away, but it took me almost 20 minutes to return. I bought 2 packs, which turned out to be heavier than I had anticipated, especially while trying to balance them with one hand while holding the umbrella with the other. Despite my best efforts, my apron was soaked and I couldn't stop trembling. This chilly weather was something a person from a tropical country like me could never get used to. By the time I came back, the restaurant had become much more packed. A big family arrived without a reservation, and Namwan was busy rearranging tables and chairs to accommodate them. I quickly changed my apron, grabbed a can of Coke, and walked over to the first family. The mother and father were engrossed in a conversation about politics and weren't paying attention to their son. The boy had climbed onto his chair to the Kumanthong's shrine, and to my horror, he was drinking from the glass of red Fanta mint as an offering. Noi would be furious if she saw that. Oh, no. I'm so sorry, but please don't drink from that. I tried to stop the boy, but I hesitated to touch other people's children without permission. The father eventually broke away from his conversation and looked at his son with an annoyed expression. Jacob, get down from there, he commanded. But I am thirsty, the boy whined. Where's my Coke? It's right here. I'm sorry it took a while. I apologized. I took their order, but before I left, I decided to remove the food tray from the Kumanthong's shrine as well. Less than half of the soda remained in the glass. Jacob had also eaten the small fish cake and rice that were offered to the Kumanthong. Although I didn't believe in the Kumanthong, I still thought it was quite disrespectful for his parents to let him do that. I brought the tray back to the kitchen. The kid at table 14 ate the offering. I told my manager. Should I refill them? What kind of parents let their child eat from a random shelf? Namwan complained as she handed the long list of orders to the chef. Yeah, we should refill that. But first, Fa, we need 12 extra champagne glasses for table 2. There are some in the dishwasher, but probably not enough. I'll look for some more in the storage room. More customers kept coming in, and I was so busy I forgot to refill the offering. An hour or so passed, and I was helping a customer with his receipt when Jacob's mother approached me at the counter with a hysterical expression on her face. My son is missing, she screamed. I took him to the bathroom, and I got distracted from a call. He didn't come out, so I went in to check. But he wasn't there. This was definitely something above my pay grade. I called Namwan over, and she consoled the panicking mother while sending some of us to look for the boy around the restaurant area. I was sent out to the balcony. The rain had not stopped, and the wind was blowing cold droplets of rain into my face. I started shivering almost immediately. Our restaurant was on the 2nd floor of a 4-story building. The storage room and the bathroom were only accessible through the long balcony outside. A flight of stairs led down from the balcony to the parking lot. I saw Jacob's father walking around in the rain, calling out to his son. His yelling was swallowed by the sound of the heavy rain. There were many cars parked there, but there was no sign of any other human. I went into the bathroom, just to be sure. Obviously, it was empty. According to Jacob's mother, she was waiting for him in front of the bathroom, so there was no way she wouldn't have seen him leaving. Jacob might be able to fit into the small window if he tried, but I doubted he could reach it. As I was about to leave, I heard a faint giggle. Jacob? Come on out. Your parents are looking for you, I said, turning around. Nobody was there. I must have confused the sound of the rain for a child's giggle. For the storage room, it was harder to tell if someone was there at the first glance. We didn't clean it as often as we should, so it was all dusty and full of junk. Employees' lockers were located on one side, several boxes of unopened dry ingredients on the other. Broken chairs and tables were stacked near the corner of the room, with cleaning supplies scattered all over. There was only a single light bulb in there, and it was not very bright. At first glance, there was no one there. Then I heard it again. It was the sound of a child laughing, and this time, I was sure of it. The giggling sound was soft and belonged to a boy around Jacob's age. I was very spooked by this point.
Jacob?
Are you there? He's not here. Just me, a boy's voice replied, and I froze. He replied to me in Thai. Suddenly, my eyes caught a movement in the dark corner of the room. I believed I saw a small head, covered with black hair in a traditional Thai top knot, moving into the shadow and disappearing. Remembering how Jacob was blonde, I screamed and slammed the door closed, hitting my back against the balcony's railing as I backpedaled the hell out of there. When I returned to the restaurant, Jacob's father was back from his futile search. He was soaked wet and defeated. Jacob's mother was crying hysterically. The police arrived shortly after that. From their whispers, it seemed they were considering Jacob's disappearance as a kidnapping case. I gulped and turned to Namwan, who was biting her nails anxiously. Namwan, does any one of us bring a child here? I asked. What are you talking about? Namwan asked. None of us have any kids. And even if we do, Noi would never allow us to bring them here. I see, I murmured. Did you see something, Fa? She asked, suddenly becoming attentive. You should tell the police if you saw anything strange. I don't know if I saw what I think I saw. I glanced at the Kumanthong doll on the shelf. Namwan followed my gaze and gasped quietly. She then disappeared into the kitchen and came out with a refilled glass of red Fanta and a plate of food. The police watched in confusion as Namwan brought the plate to the Kumanthong shrine, but she didn't seem to care. She pressed her hands together and started to pray in silence. As I watched her, I also called out to the Kumanthong in my mind and asked him to help find the missing child. Not even 10 minutes had passed when one of the policemen ran into the restaurant. We found him. We could not believe our eyes as another policeman walked in with Jacob cuddled in his arms. I didn't get a good look at him because he was quickly carried away to the ambulance, with his parents rushing behind. We all had a big collective sigh of relief. But then the policeman started to look very serious. We found him in one of the bathroom stalls. Apparently, he never left, the policeman said. You guys did check the bathroom, right? Countless times. Namwan insisted. Both his parents went in to look for him. Almost all of our employees went in. Even one of you guys went in when you first arrived, remember? This is really strange. The policeman scratched his head. How did none of us see him during the 2 hours he was missing? He must have been playing with Kumanthong. Perhaps the Kumanthong didn't want his playtime to be over yet. One of the kitchen hands murmured. Namwan turned to glare at him. After all, she didn't want them to think we were a bunch of superstitious crazy people. Although it was still unexplainable at the time, the police accepted their win and left. My life resumed its normal routine. We never saw Jacob's family again, which was understandable. I wouldn't want to come back either if I were them. I still thought about them and the weird encounter in the storage room from time to time, and I brought it up with Namwan one day. Actually, a policeman dropped by a week after that, Namwan said. You weren't here since it was not your shift. He came to ask if we had seen any suspicious individuals that day. They suspected that something emotionally traumatic happened to that kid. Why did they think so? I asked, because the boy wouldn't speak to anyone after the whole ordeal. His parents said it was like he was a different person. When he finally talked, he spoke in a language they didn't understand. His diet also changed. He wouldn't eat anything except pig blood curd. They were pretty spooked and concerned. It seemed. Namwan handed me the tray. Anyway, take this to the Kumin Thong, will you? I looked at the tray. The glass was filled with Coke this time, and the food offering was not Thai food, but a small portion of mac and cheese and 2 pieces of chicken nuggets. Mac and cheese? Namwan shrugged nervously. Well, I just think that maybe he might prefer this. We never heard from Jacob's family again. Noi still refused to move the shrine from its original place. Therefore, we just tried to avoid seating families with young children near the Kumanthong shrine nowadays. If you're reading this, please make sure to remind your children to behave when out in public, especially when you visit a Thai restaurant. Otherwise, the child you take back home might not really be yours. Fourth story. We were renovating my father's house and found a secret room. To say my father, Dennis Hargrove, was different would be like saying getting pepper sprayed was mildly unpleasant. It communicates the idea, but not nearly to the extreme that it's true. Dad was so wildly eccentric no woman could ever put up with him. Mom left him when I was 4, never saw her again, and I'm pretty sure that's as long as any woman ever stayed with him. Years of a successful medical practice meant Dad had a lot of money and even more land, and he wasn't a bad-looking dude. So getting women was a walk in the park. Getting them to stick around was a nightmare. Mary, the woman he was with until he died, stayed with him until the end, but I could see she hated him. She never came in the same room as him without a scowl on her face. When he finally passed after a long, arduous fight with heart disease, she vanished. She was no spring chicken herself. I had offered for her to stay in the house as long as she needed. My wife and I weren't moving in, and the only response we ever received was, "I'll not be in this house one damn second after that old bastard passes." Now that Dad's gone and the place is vacant, my wife, Jenny, and I decided to gut the old place and fix it up. It'll make a nice rental property. She and I never had any kids, so we don't need a place this big. Plus, we have no real desire to leave the city. It's a nice old home, but it was very dated. Shag carpet, spiral staircase, wood panels on the walls. It's like a Sears catalog from the 70s vomited into this place. For all of Dad's money and his constant attempts to keep up with the Joneses my whole life, he never would do anything to house that involved any real work. All new appliances and furniture, but couldn't bring himself to get rid of the hideous green plastic tiles that line the shower walls. Our renovation began in the living room, working our way through the kitchen, the bathroom, and the master bedroom when Jenny noticed something weird. "Honey, have you ever noticed this wall isn't farther than the wall in the bathroom? That's an exterior wall. Shouldn't they be in the same place?" "No," I replied. "I never noticed. That's how it's always been." "Think the water heater is in there or something?" "No, the water heater is in that alcove next to the washer and dryer." We stood and contemplated for a minute. We weren't going to bust down the drywall on that wall. Every other wall had that stupid wood paneling but this one. But I looked at Jenny and said, "Ah, what the hell?" and swung my hammer through the drywall. It gave way with no effort. So much so I almost fell through it when my hammer didn't meet any resistance. I knocked a few more holes in the wall and stuck my head and a flashlight through the hole. "Hey, there's a staircase in here." "No way. Where does it go?" "I didn't know this place had a basement." "It doesn't," I replied. "At least I don't think it does." So, we knocked the rest of the drywall out until we had a hole big enough we could both fit through. We grabbed our flashlights and headed down the staircase. "What do you think is down here, baby?" Think this is where your dad stored all his gold bars? Huge wads of cash? Vintage porn collection? Jenny said, coughing. The dust was getting stirred as we made our descent. Jenny coughed and itched as we went down. Poor girl was allergic to everything. She'd always joke about how I was never sick, and she always was. Haha, I'm not sure, dear. I've never known this was here. I'm sure he had it sectioned off for a good reason. At the bottom of the steps was a large steel door with a padlock on it. Dad had the same lock on his chest of war relics he had in the attic. So I tried the key, and we walked into the basement that never was. It was pitch black. We shined our lights around to find a light switch, but found several candles. I used my cigarette lighter to light a few to give us enough light to see. The basement was an open floor, with tapestries and wheeled bookshelves everywhere. Tucked in one corner were several boy-sized wooden mannequins. Tim, what is all of this stuff? I'm not sure. Looks like an old collection of books on world religions, mysticism, the occult, alchemy, you name it. What was your dad doing with all of this? I thought he was Catholic. He is, or was. I'm not really sure. Most of these books look like they haven't been touched in years. Actually, I don't think anything down here has. Hey, look. There's a desk over here in the corner. Looks like your dad's handwriting on some of these pages. I approached the desk and fumbled around the papers. Most of them were letters from men with names I couldn't pronounce, most likely from other countries. They all dealt with Eastern mysticism, resurrection of the dead, every terrible thing you can imagine. Tim, Jenny asked, was your dad practicing some kind of black magic? I'm not sure. I thumbed through more of the papers. Hey, here's a letter from Mom, dated 1976. You were what, 5 then? Yeah, that's about a year after she left. Well, what does it say? I glossed over the letter as quickly as I could. She's telling Dad she still loves him, but she'll never forgive him for what he's done. For creating some kind of monster. What monster? Tim, I really think your dad was into some serious shit here if your mom left him for it. I know, and I'm not sure. Dad was always pretty normal. I have no idea what she's talking about. We scoured the papers and the documents Dad had sitting around. I inspected the mannequins. They were all covered with runes and glyphs, no doubt related to some of the black magic Dad was studying. Jenny sat in the corner combing through papers while I continued to snoop around. Tim, I think I have something. What's that? In all your dad's letters, he seems like he's trying to knock on a very particular door. Here's one your dad translated where some Eastern mystic talks about rescuing a soul from the afterlife, bringing it back to this dimension. Then this man from Cambodia is telling him how to bind souls to mannequins, see, and all these symbols he's put at the bottom dash. Match the ones on the mannequins. What else is in the letters? Well, there's one here from a chemist at Caltech, dated August 1975. There are some pretty complex chemical formulas here, and apparently some magic too. What does it make? Some kind of synthetic skin, rather real skin, that can grow and bleed without any organs. The chemist calls it the perfect disguise for someone who doesn't belong here. I don't understand. So Dad wanted to make some kind of living dead doll with skin? Given how your mother reacted, it looks like he was successful. There are even letters here from some of the people he consulted congratulating him. I thumbed through more random papers around the basement. Jenny did likewise, thumbing around through letters and envelopes Dad had strung across that corner of the room. I continued to look when I noticed Jenny had stopped moving, sitting in the corner, her eyes fixed on a single document. Tim, she said as she began sobbing uncontrollably. Tim, I know who. She couldn't speak past the sobbing. I approached her. What's wrong? I asked. She tried to hold back the tears as she handed me the paper. I picked it up, and my heart sank when I realized what it was. Certificate of Death for Timothy Wayne Hargrove, December 8, 1974. Cause of death, brain trauma. Fifth story, Wendigo. I never thought it would be the last time I saw my little sister. It started out as such a typical Friday afternoon. The bell rung, and we had the whole weekend to look forward to. We lived in a small town in Michigan. It was one of those towns where everyone knew everyone. One of those towns where you basically felt safe anywhere you went. We lived in a small split-level house. My little sister and I shared a bedroom, and my parents were directly across the hall from us. Our house backed onto a deep, vast forest, and through the middle of the forest was a river. The woods always provided a sort of natural playground for the local kids, building tree forts, playing hide and go seek, and swimming the more shallow parts of the river. My little sister and I felt especially lucky. The woods were essentially my backyard, and we really felt like they were ours. Our parents were fine with us playing in the woods. They just had one rule: don't cross to the other side of the river. The woods on our side of the river were quite well traveled by all the locals. By age 7 you knew them like the back of your hand. The other side of the river, however, was much less traveled. It was our town's myth, kind of our own scary claim to fame. The Mi'kmaq tribe had largely settled the area around our town, so there were a lot of stories based on Native American culture. Everyone's favorite story was about the Wendigo. A Wendigo is a Native American legend, supposedly a half-man, half-beast type creature. The rumor is that during a harsh Michigan winter, a member of the Mi'kmaq tribe and his hunting partner got caught during a blizzard. The tribe member's partner died, and with no food, the tribe member was forced to eat him. Native Americans believe that Wendigos are born when a member of their tribe is forced to resort to cannibalism due to harsh conditions, such as weather or a famine. And so, legend was born, and people began to believe that a Wendigo hunted for more flesh in our woods. Everyone from here has a story that they would be having a campfire in the woods, and all of a sudden a deep resonating roar would sound out through the forest. The belief around here was that the Wendigo would not hunt for you. So long as you stayed on our side of the river, the rest of the woods beyond the river belonged to him. As per usual Friday ritual, my friends and I filled our backpacks with our swim trunks, snacks, soda, and other trinkets to spend the rest of the day playing in the woods. As we were leaving, my little sister came running out of the house. I was 13, and she was 9. She was begging me to come spend the day in the woods with my friends and I. Normally, I would say no, but it was such a beautiful day, and she really was not much of a hassle to have along. So I said yes. There were 4 of us, including my little sister and I. It was 3 in the afternoon at the beginning of June, so we knew we would have daylight for quite a while. Off we went into the woods, taking the same trail that we took every time. The trail led us straight to the river, where we would set up a little camp and spend the rest of the day playing and swimming. A few hours rolled by, and we were pretty tired. There was not much left to do, so I suggested that we pack up and head home. Now, 13 can be quite a rebellious age, the age where you start to disobey your parents, maybe act out in school here and there, try a cigarette, pretty typical teenage behavior. "Let's cross to the other side of the river," one of my friends exclaimed. In my head, I knew this was a terrible idea. Growing up here, you barely have any rules to follow. Not going to the other side of the river was an explicit one, however. "Yeah, I've always wanted to do that," my other friend said in agreement. In my head, I knew this was a bad idea, but I also did not want to seem like a chicken in front of my friends. "Well, okay," I said cautiously. My little sister looked at me. Her big blue eyes were full of fear. I reassured her, telling her that nothing bad would happen. And so, we began to walk to the point in the river where it was shallow enough to walk across. We arrived, and I will be honest, the other side of the river looked like an entirely different world. It was darker. It honestly just had this entire unfriendly vibe to it. I brushed it off that it was all in my head. It was about 7:30 p.m., and the sun was beginning to set in the sky, though we still had plenty of daylight. We walked across the river. It was about ankle deep at this point, and the water was frigid here, a lot colder than it was where we were swimming. I put my foot down on the other side of the river. For the first time in my entire life, I had done what so many people who grew up here feared to do. Just standing there felt uneasy. It really felt like we did not belong there. But at the same time, there was that feeling of adrenaline pumping through my body, and it carried me as we began walking deeper into the woods. My little sister was attached to my hip. I felt bad. She truly had no interest in being here, but also wanted to appear brave in front of my friends. As we got deeper into the woods, the feeling of dread increased. The weird part is, it was not what I could hear. It's what I could not hear. There was not a sound, not a cricket, not a bird, not even the river. It was silent, deadly silent. The trees seemed so much thicker in this part of the woods. Not as much sunlight came through, so it was definitely darker, not just my imagination. Crack we heard in the distance. Everyone gasped. I cannot reiterate enough that it was silent. There was not a single noise coming from anywhere, but then to hear that distinct crack, it made my heart skip a beat. Probably just a deer. There's tons of them in the woods, one of my friends stated. At this point, I wanted to turn back, but for some reason we just kept going. The stories were echoing through my head about the Wendigo, about how foolish people over the years had dared to cross over to this side of the river, and how they were never seen again. As we continued to explore the uncharted part of the woods, another crack this time came from behind us. That one really startled everyone. We had all decided that it was time to head back. It was really starting to get dark. There was just one problem. This side of the woods was unfamiliar to us, and we were lost. My little sister began to cry upon realizing this, and while I was doing my best to settle her down, she was really scared, and I have to admit that I was too. The minimal light that was previously coming down from between the thick trees was now beginning to fade as the sun began to set. The darkness was becoming even darker, and we had not even thought to bring flashlights. The thought of Wendigo ran through my head time and time again, each time sending a sickening chill down my spine. We tried everything we could to find our way back to the shallow spot of the river, but it was to no avail. We could not even find the river to begin with. Crack we heard again from behind us, then a low rumble that resonated through the trees. Whoosh, a gust of wind hit us from the side, knocking me back and knocking my little sister over. The rumble got louder, growing into more of a roar. "It's a bear!" screamed one of my friends. Whoosh, another gust of wind hit us, this time from behind. Crack. Whoosh, this time it hit us in the front, knocking all of us over. "Run!" I bellowed, and we all ran, leaving our backpacks behind. I had my little sister's hand in mine, essentially dragging her through the dirt and leaves on the ground of the forest. I could definitely hear something running. Fast footsteps. They would be behind us, then beside us, then gone. "It's the river!" screamed one of my friends. We all stopped as we approached the river's edge. It was too dark to tell if it was shallow or deep at this point. The roar returned, this time coming from behind us, and it was close. "We have to jump in," I said. And oh, my two friends and my little sister screamed simultaneously. Fast footsteps approached, a low growl, and multiple cracks as the predator approached us. "Now!" I screamed, and in we jumped. The last thing I heard before my head sunk under the water was a roar, inhuman and nothing like an animal could produce. I knew what had just chased us, and I know how good of a hunter it is. My question to myself was why, and how are we still alive? The water was pitch black, and it was deep. We were all strong swimmers, and managed to find our way to the other side of the river, our side of the river. Even in the dark, we were able to navigate this side of the river and find our way back to the trail that led to my house. The whole walk back, all I could think about how was if Wendigo wanted us dead. We would be dead. Every legend about it speaks about how it is the best hunter, and how once it tracks you, you are dead. We arrived back at my house to some very angry parents, scolding us. We all explained how we had just lost track of time, having too much fun playing in the woods. They bought all of our explanations. No way were we going to mention the fact that we went exactly where we had been told not to go our entire lives. I prepared myself for bed and went to lie down in my bed. It was hot this time of year, so my window was open. It was letting in a gentle breeze that felt quite nice, so I decided to just leave it open. As I lie there, I hear the sound of the quick footsteps again, accompanied by the low rumbling. My palms began to sweat. My heart dropped into my stomach. Had Wendigo tracked us back to our house? As slowly as possible, I turned the lever and closed my window, doing my best not to make a sound. My little sister was asleep on the bed parallel to mine, and I did not want her to hear any of this. I shut the window and flipped the latch to lock it. My parents were asleep. My little sister was asleep. I was the only one awake for this. I lay under my covers, noticing every little sound my old house made. And then I heard it. The kitchen door was opening. It makes a distinct squeak when it opens. I began to shake. Wendigo had come. I could hear it moving about our basement, knocking a glass over, opening cupboards. The sound of fast footsteps below me. The fast footsteps became louder as Wendigo made its way up our staircase and to my bedroom door. The knob turned, and Wendigo was inside my bedroom. I shook violently, my hands clammy, my stomach sick. I hid under my covers as I listened to the low rumble grow louder and louder with each footstep it took in my room. And then whoosh, the same sound it had made as it hunted us in the woods. The rumbling had stopped, and the fast footsteps were gone. Wendigo too was gone as I emerged from under my covers. But where did it go? The sun shined brightly into my room the next morning, and I hopped out of bed. I went downstairs to find my parents sitting in the kitchen, my dad reading the newspaper and drinking coffee, my mom frying bacon for breakfast. "Morning, champ. You must have slept well after your big day yesterday," my dad said. He was right. It was 11 a.m., and I rarely sleep past 9:30. "The same for your sister," my mom said. "Why don't you go wake her up, champ?" my dad said. I immediately ran upstairs to our room, and to this day, it is still the most horrific sight that I have ever laid eyes upon. My little sister's bed was empty. "Mom, Dad, come quick," I cried out. They both ran upstairs. "Oh my God, where is she?" my mom said. She was already beginning to cry. We looked everywhere. She was not in the house. My parents looked outside, and within an hour, a search party had formed. They searched the woods top to bottom, but she was nowhere to be found. My parents believed that she had wandered off to the woods in the morning, fell in the lake, and drowned. But I knew why they could not find her. I knew why they would never find her. They were looking in the wrong side of the woods. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.